So there's a phenomenon called missing stare. You can look it up on the Geek Feminism Wiki. I really wish I had like a great presentation with like links, but the internet's not working. I'm sorry. But one of the things that comes up a lot in small communities, and this has been true, in fact, in sci-fi and comic communities, we see some of these things filtering out, right? You hear about it years later after the complaints happen. Is that, unfortunately, when it happens, you have to take the risk of people not liking you and saying, with whatever level of evidence, whatever level of facts that are necessary to present, this is happening, this is not okay, and make it a community discussion. It's not always going to go well. I'm just going to be honest. It's not. There are going to be people who are going to be forever like, well, you know how so-and-so is. You could have just let that slide, but you can't. Anybody else want to add in about problematic individuals in small communities or large communities?
Yeah, a lot of my notes for today were about community management because I work in media, and I personally am lucky enough to have never been like targeted harassment. I've been on the radio or on TV for a long time, actually, like since I was a teenager doing stuff. So I personally have become immune to any sort of criticism in a way. Like, I see emails, I see tweets, I see Facebook messages all the time, and at this point, you know, I have, as I remind people within my own profession sometimes about social media, is that we're professionals. We are trained in messaging, we are trained in how to respond to people, that in a way, since our profession is communication, we always need to be the bigger people. And I think of I was thinking of journalists who've been terribly trolled in the past. These are always journalists who cover race, gender, really like race and gender, and or they could be covering anything else and just happen to be a woman or a person of color, or both. And I think what I was thinking about with community management is legacy media, things like radio stations, newspapers, they've seen the financial effect of not keeping up with how people interact with what they do. And I was thinking of examples of people who do community management well, and they've all been basically internet companies, despite all of their other problems and the problems they brought about on themselves by switching their commenting system. Gawker used to be a really wonderful place for the comments because they had a small and devoted following. They had self-policing in the comments. They have, and they do a good job of this now, editors constantly looking at comments. It's part of their daily jobs. And when I turned somewhere to the Sun-Times here in Chicago, which had to turn off their comments for a really long time, like that was their solution, which is kind of a media solution with a lot of problems. Just be like, just shut it down, we don't want to deal with it. And comments, because we can be honest and say they don't have the resources to hire people. You can also look at how they're managed. Yes, you could prioritize hiring a community engagement officer or whatever name you want to give it. But I think that there's a professionalism always that journalists, media workers have to keep themselves to and remind themselves that they have. Mickey, when you were written about as like the worst feminist in the world, in the nation, which what is, the nation has a circulation of 60,000?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, there are people with more Twitter followers than these places have subscribers, and they think that they're doing something. But it matters. It's legacy media. These are people with connections. These are people who are making money. And to act like Mickey, who at the time you were still working for the federal government, when I saw that, it's like Mickey's a person, a mom. She's got 2 kids. She lives on the south side of Chicago in Hyde Park. How can she be one of the worst things to happen to feminism? How can this single woman be ruining the discourse of Twitter for everybody else? And a lot of the times,
she's brown.
yes, spoiler alert. And she has people who listen to her, that this is the biggest fear of social media. I think I'm just kind of going on a rant right now.
No, I think it's important to consider the fact that also, before you're afraid, I don't want this to be a panel that scares you out of speaking. I want you to understand it doesn't matter what you're talking about. Somebody's not going to like it. They're going to be people who really have a reaction. So I definitely want this to be a panel where you come away understanding both the risks and ways to protect yourself. Because for me, I wound up in the nation because I had a hashtag, Solidarities for White Women. I talked about feminism and race. This could have been the hashtag that trended for 5 seconds and went away, but I made people angry. Spoiler, if you keep tweeting about a hashtag, it doesn't matter what you say in it. It still makes it trend. Shh.
Well, I guess for tips that other people have been giving out, one of the things that, like, as a professional media worker, I've had to train myself with, especially as somebody who kind of grew up on the internet, is, like, the step away is so huge. You know, we've talked about that, like, log off, okay? Log off, step away. I was kind of giving some personal advice to a friend who had a Twitter crisis. You know, all of a sudden a bunch of people are really upset and you feel this need to respond immediately. And I'm like, you know what? That is just a product of how fast communication is now. Like, take even 3 hours sometimes. Like, 3 hours. That's a ton of time. That's still a reasonable time to respond to people. Just back away. I mean, the journalists who have done trolling, I'll say Andrew Goldman at the New York Times, who was suspended for 4 weeks. He recently lost his job over like questioning Diane von Furstenberg a little too toughly, and she's a big ad buyer with the New York Times. So that's ultimately what got him fired. But he was suspended for 4 weeks for responding to another author, Jennifer Weiner's critiques about his misogyny in his interviews. And they had a Twitter policy. They didn't have a Twitter policy at the New York Times. At the time, the public editor said, "This is horrific. This is unbelievable. You're a professional. What are you doing? You know, talking to people like this online." And that's really the kind of standard I hold myself to. Like, I'm always watching what's going on in conversations on Twitter, but it's like, I do not need to wade into it, and I can bite my tongue about it. I have, particularly when you're a media person, you're like, I have a radio show, so I don't need to get into this Twitter argument right now, thank you.
Well, and it's also important to remember, because what you're doing online can come back to bite you in the butt. How many people remember Justine Sacco? Right? So Justine Sacco tweeted a joke. She works in PR. She tweeted a joke. She says it's a joke. We're going to go with her definition. That she was going to Africa, presumably to visit her family there, and she was have to get AIDS. So wait, no, I won't. I'm white. Now, there are two ways to take that joke. One way is that she's making fun of the narratives around Africa and the risks, and the other is that she's a big old bigot. I don't live in Justine Sacco's head. I can't tell you which one was the answer. By the time she landed, people were meeting her at the airport to take pictures and talk about Justine Sacco needs to lose her job, yada, yada, yada. So she lost her job. She's got a new job now. Life went on, right? Because that's the other thing to remember about this when we're talking about the trolling and harassment. Most of the time, even if you're doxxed, even if you are, Jen's still here, revenge porn or whatever, eventually, your life keeps moving. The person who has gotten so worked up to hate follow you, to risk running afoul of the law, to do all of these things, they're stuck on something you can't control, you can't deal with for them. You kind of got to, toughen up buttercup, as rough as that sounds. And that's not to say that it's easier, that it's not emotionally traumatizing. It absolutely can be. But there are certainly ways, the coastway is not consent that's running across the screen over and over again behind me. It's certainly one of those things where you can tell people so much and then the rest of it is on them, So, am I missing anything? I'm going to make sure nobody is in the audience doing the hand thing and I missed it.
No, Mickey,
Okay.
I just wanted to actually capitalize on what you were saying. Yes, I am still here, and yes, I am louder, stronger, smarter, and a hell of a lot meaner because of it. That was the best revenge I could have gotten in my life, was just to keep on keeping on and get louder and fight against this shit. Because there's no reason, no regard. Be it if you're thinking this is a joke, or if you got your feelings hurt, there was no reason for anybody to carry on with any of the harassment that has been going on recently for anybody. So the best thing to keep doing, and it's going to be hard, keep on keeping on, because that's going to piss them off even more.
Right, and I mean, we look at things like Gamergate. Oh, there's a hand. Oh wait, go ahead. I'll go with the hand first.
This is for the
Well,
Oh, I have thoughts.
okay, go ahead.
Yes. I don't know what you have your thoughts, because I have some thoughts.
I have a lot of thoughts about bullying.
So, for people that think, oh, well, it's just words and you need to toughen up, to me it's equivalent of toxic masculinity of, oh, well, you need to toughen up and be a man about it, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Harassing someone until they cry, talk about suicide, delete their Twitter, delete all traces of existing on social media, does fuck all. And, I think you came up yesterday before the other panel. I have feelings about people that are supposedly neutral in Gamergate, and y'all can tweet this, I really don't care. Fuck them. There is no neutrality. Because if there was neutrality, this shit would not still be going on since last August.
Right.
So it's almost May of the next year. If there was truly neutrality and this was all about ethics, there's so many things about ethics and the way that articles are bribed and written and the way that the gaming industry is fucked up, they would actually be talking about those things. No, this is instead, oh my God, Anita Sarkeesian had a sandwich. She used her Patreon money. We have to talk about this for 20 hours, make 20 videos, snap pictures of her having this ill-gotten sandwich, and she talked to Catherine Cross once in her life. Well, it's more than once. Collusion. And it's just ridiculous. There is no neutrality. And the idea that someone's supposed to be toughened up and you're making things better by harassing someone, that's bullshit.
And also, where the hell do they think that they're doing a favor? Why do they try to make it sound like you're doing a favor? You're doing a favor by what Tanya said. You're going to perpetuate and exacerbate this toxic hypermasculinity that we live in this culture. And also, I didn't ask you for help.
Well,
Unsolicited advice does not work when you're dealing with people of agency. And if this is your definition of help, no, it's not. This has nothing to do with you helping me. This has to do with you getting all pissy because you don't automatically get the pie anymore.
she's had a whole moment there. I was gonna say also, humans can justify anything to themselves. The scariest thing about humans is that we will convince ourselves we are right and we are wrong. The KKK believes they're right. So you can't tell me that, well, bullying is to toughen you up. No, you're bullying because you want to kill somebody. You don't have the stones to go out to try to kill somebody. You want to drive them to kill themselves. You want to drive them to delete themselves, to erase themselves, to harm themselves. That's what bullying is about. Bullying is about your bullshit. It's not about anybody else. However, I'm not saying toughen up buttercup means that, I say toughen up buttercup because to a certain degree, I have decided at this point that fuck these assholes. I've been in public in sci-fi and fandom circles for the better part of 5 years. I have been called everything. You cannot come up with a thing to call me that somebody hasn't. I've been called everything from a professional nigger, to a cunt, to a bitch, to a whore. All of it has been aimed at me at one point in time or another. And I can either stop and let them win, or me personally, my decision, not the decision you should make, can just be a bigger and louder asshole. I'm really good at being a bigger and louder asshole. But also, I just hate bullies. They just get on my fucking nerves. Get a hobby.